thank everybody for being here tonight. If you'll rise for the invocation, please. Almighty God, we just give you great thanks and praise, especially after the Easter holidays. We celebrate the resurrection and just pray that we always honor you first in everything we say and do. We thank you so much for your blessing on our city. Guide us and direct us tonight. We ask this all in Jesus' name, and everybody says, Amen. Excuse me, and standing for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May be seated. Okay, do we have any changes to tonight's agenda?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, as a reminder to council, we do have an executive session following our regular meeting. You've all received the minutes from our last meeting on March 28th. If there are no questions or comments, I'll accept the motion to receive the minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Councilman King, I'll second the motion.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, okay, it's unanimous. All right, do we have anybody here tonight for public comment?
Oh, we do. Susan Michael? Yep.
Could you come up to the mic and state your name and address for the record?
Susan Michael. I live at 308 Bradford Street.
And I'm Chris Cathcart.
And I have a handout.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So these are neighbors that live across from me and diagonal from Chris. They moved in a couple years ago. For 2 years, we've been complaining about the car in the backyard that has been untagged. I've called the city several times. Kay Chaffinch has also called the city. Chris has also called the city. They had cars in their driveway that were untagged. The city did last week go put signs on them. They did remove those cars. However, they've taken all the pieces from the cars that were out front and have put everything in the backyard. So everything it looks like trash. There's pictures of garbage in the front yard.
What address is this?
311 Bradford Street. And we have tried to get the city to go back there and do something with it. We also, between 4:30 and 5:30 every morning, they go down the street and they beep the horn to get the people out of the house. So we're all woken up between 4:30 and 5:30 in the morning when they beep their horns. So we just, if I have an overgrown bush in the alley, I get a letter from the city complaining that my bush is overgrown. But to look at this and to have Andrew on one side and Chris on the other, have to look at this every single night, it's really,
Sorry.
It's just sad. It doesn't look good for, our street. We all try to keep the front of our houses neat and, as working for Home Team Realty and we have managed a lot of rental properties, I get a letter from the city if the grass is overgrown, if there's a mattress outside, for anything, and it's for rentals, but not for someone's personal home. And they really, we try to take pride in our street. We try to take pride in the city of Seaford. We just want someone to take care of this mess.
And there's numerous people that live in the house. We have no idea. There's like 6, 8 cars out there every night. How many people are living there? And that's not counting the people who don't drive because they're getting picked up by someone.
Okay. We will follow up on this. Make sure we have both of your contact information. Ashley, make sure we, okay. And we will follow up. We'll look into this and we'll follow up with you right away.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here for public comment?
Dan Cannon.
Mr. Cannon, you want to come up?
I must confess, the number 4,400 has captured my attention, along with a 3% factor number. But to get started, tonight Mayor and City Council are set to consider yet another change to Seaford's charter, this one to allow non-persons, called artificial entities, the right to vote in Seaford elections. Mayor Genshaw called for this change to allow voting rights for a dozen or so non-resident owners of property titled with business names. However, to me, consideration of artificial entity enfranchisement is really a case of sadly misplaced priorities, devoting attention, time, and effort to reach a goal of seemingly very limited importance. This is especially true because there's a much larger evidence-based problem confronting our municipal elections. In Seaford's last municipal election on April 16th of last year, only 600 voters participated. I use the words only 600 because there were more than 5,000 eligible to vote. A more poignant way to characterize this is that more than 4,400 eligible voters did not vote in last year's election. 4,400. My limited math skills were barely tested to realize that the potential payoff for solving the problem of getting 4,400 more eligible voters to vote is more than 350 times greater than the payoff for enfranchising perhaps a dozen new artificial entity voters. Therefore, why are we focusing all this time, attention, and effort to identify a few new potential voters when it'd be far more productively spent getting 4,400 more eligible voters to the polls this Saturday, 4/15/23, and every election thereafter? Mayor and City Council should drop the potential can of worms giving artificial entities in the vote and prioritize solving a real major problem, getting all the currently eligible voters out to vote. And the 3% factor. Bad news from the federal government. For the most favorable terms of borrowing millions, the effort factor that would be required from Seaford's water sewer customers has been raised from 2% to 3%. This 3% effort requirement means that now Mayor and City Council would have to almost double the current $75.91 per month water and sewer rates in order to qualify for the most favorable terms. Doesn't sound like a doable option. Thank you.
Okay, do we have anyone else here for public comment?
We just have one more on the list, Mike Bradley.
All right, you want to come up?
Mr. Mayor, council members, Mr. Griffith, I'll keep this short and sweet. First of all, I'm hoping you will give business owners that own their properties, maintain them, pay taxes, and are in good standing with the city an opportunity to vote in city elections. As I ventured around talking to friends and business owners, this has come up in discussion, and decisions made here affect them and their livelihood. They employ people that attract customers to our town, which I feel enhances growth. I was a little taken back when I read we should spend extra effort, on the 4,000 that don't show up at the polls. That has been one of my main goals of my campaign, as I'm sure it has been with my counterparts. We've tried our best to touch on those 4,000s, and I know you have too. In closing, I would like to say, in a world of negativity, it has been a pleasure to run with such fine gentlemen.
Thank you, Marty.
Okay, do we have anybody else here for public comment? No? Okay. While we are on the election, I do want to remind the public that we do have an election this Saturday, 7 to 3 o'clock here at City Hall. You can still absentee vote up until Friday at 12 noon, correct? Pick up your absentee ballot. So voting is very simple to do. Takes very little time. You just need to show up and do your part as a citizen of this town. So I do know that each of the candidates have walked the streets and have knocked on a lot of doors, and I've had numerous door hangers on mine. So appreciate the effort and the willingness to run for office. That says a lot, so we appreciate that. Okay, do we have any correspondence?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, under new business number 1, we have the soda ash marketing bump.
Yeah, just for council's edification, Director Mears is out on a family vacation this week, but he did ask that I present a couple items for him. The first item is the replacement of the soda ash feed system out at the 534 water treatment facility. That facility was built in 1993, so it's 30 years old. Our staff has kept that equipment going, but basically that equipment now is beyond repair and needs to be replaced. The 534 water treatment system, it actually has 2 wells. It's located out at the utility building. It is a very critical well for domestic water production in the city, especially now with the Delaney Street well that had to be taken out of service due to contamination. The director is recommending that we replace this pump now, get it ordered. It's a 10 to 12 week lead time. He would like to get it in place prior to the summer season when water production has to increase. The cost of that new pump feed system is $17,548 plus freight. He would like to take this out of water reserves, which we do have the money for this, but certainly the purchase is recommended to make sure the reliability of that system is maintained.
Okay, are there any questions in regards to purchasing this metering pump? Mr. Henderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The letter does not identify a vendor, or if there was, well, I guess it's under the bid threshold, but have you identified a vendor?
I have not.
You got a price?
Yeah, I have not. I would have to talk to the director about that. But it is, all we need to do at this price is get quotes from several vendors. So if this is approved, I'll certainly ensure that he gets adequate quotes for this.
Thank you.
Other questions? If not, I'll accept the motion.
All right, Mr. Mayor, Councilman King, I'll make the motion to approve the request from Burley Mears, Director of Public Works, to purchase a soda ash metering pump for the 534 water treatment facility as an expedited purchase with funding provided by the Water Capital Reserves as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Santos seconds. Any questions on the motion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
And Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous, so we'll have Mr. Mears follow up with who he's done. Next, we have bids on clean week.
Excuse me. So you do have a memo in your package from the Director of Public Works. We did receive 3 bids for cleanup week services. The low bidder was Waste Industries. They submitted a price of $190 per pull, so the total base bid would be $23,700. This is only estimated for cleanup week because we don't know the volume of material we're going to get, but cleanup week is right around the corner, and we would recommend getting this vendor in place.
Okay, are there any questions in regards to the bids on cleanup week? If not, I'll accept the motion.
All right, Mr. Mayor, Councilman King, I'll make a motion to award the bid for cleanup week to Waste Industries in the amount of $190 per pool for a total base bid of $23,700 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Holland, I second that motion.
Okay, are there any questions on the motion? If not, we'll do another roll call vote. Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
And Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. And then finally, we have the radiator repair on the antique fire truck.
So Mr. Rick Marvel is here, and he's going to assist me with any questions that council might have. But as council is aware, we are the owner of antique fire engine number 1 that is across the parking lot here in the Fire Department Museum. Over the last few years, that committee has been working on that piece of equipment, trying to maintain it, and they found a problem with the existing radiator. Mr. Marvel actually removed the radiator from the existing piece of equipment, drove it to Pennsylvania because he had a vendor that offered to repair it, and I believe the number for that repair was estimated to be $5,400. And we authorized that. We issued a purchase order for it. When that vendor got into the piece of equipment and looked at how complicated the radiator was, he decided he could not do it in his shop. So he worked with another vendor, and they have a price now. They haven't started work on it. We have to authorize additional funds. They actually have to get the radiator core from England. So it has to be shipped over. But they are currently estimating the repairs now to be $9,500 for that. We would recommend repairing this, getting that piece of equipment back on the road. We use it for parades, you know, so certainly I will do my best to answer any questions, but Mr. Marvel's here. He is on the committee, and I would consider him an expert in this piece of equipment.
Yeah, so council, I also want to thank Councilman Henderson for leading that committee for several years now. So are there any questions in regards to this repair to engine number 1? Yes, Councilman King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the people that are watching tonight and don't understand the significance or importance of this piece of equipment, can we talk a little bit about the history of it?
Yeah, I'm limited. Certainly, Mr. Marvel, as a lifelong fighter, is going to help me, but I believe we were given that engine, we obtained that engine, and we were given the funds to repair it. But that was the first mechanical piece of equipment that Seaford Volunteer Fire Department ever owned. And it is a 1919 Seagraves. Did I get that correct, sir? Yeah, so it is a very special piece. It's beautiful, and if you have not seen it, I would highly recommend that you do see it. And we would like to keep it roadworthy. The Vice Mayor and I have had several discussions. It has not been in a parade for a couple years now, 3 years. So we would like to get it roadworthy again, parade ready if we possibly can. The belief is that if we can go ahead and get this radiator repaired, we think we can get it back out and let the public enjoy it at significant events.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll accept the motion.
Bear with me just a second. Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the proposal to repair the radiator of the antique fire engine number 1 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Henderson. Is there a second?
Councilman King, I'll second the motion.
Okay, are there any questions on the motion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Santos?
Aye.
Councilman King?
Aye.
Councilman Holland?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. All right, next we have under old business changes, draft changes to section 7 of the charter. Mr. Griffith, you're going to lead us in this conversation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. City Manager and members of council. As you all may recall, I was before you on March 14th to discuss and address certain questions about draft language to change the charter to allow businesses and artificial entities to vote in municipal elections. There were some very good questions raised, very good issues discussed, and we agreed to take a second look at the language and maybe change some of the language, get some interpretations of the existing language, so we'd be in a better position to address any of these questions and discuss these issues. So what we did was we did make some changes to the language that I'll talk about. I spoke with, had a meeting yesterday with the city solicitor for Fenwick Island, who also has a similar provision in their charter where businesses vote to get their interpretation of this same language. And we also took a look at other parts of our charter, in particular the provisions that have special elections for annexations. So with that, I'll go through a couple of the changes we've made and some of the interpretations we've learned about. The first and the easiest was back on March 14th, one of the questions raised was, well, shouldn't these businesses and artificial entities be in good standing if they are going to be permitted to vote in our municipal elections? That was a pretty easy change. We did include a provision that these businesses, these artificial entities must be in good standing in order to vote in our municipal elections. There was also a question raised about whether, what if one individual owns multiple businesses under different names, how that would work. In my meeting with the city solicitor for Fenwick Island, he made it very clear that it's one person, one vote. No matter how many businesses you own, you could own 20 businesses and live in the city, you get one vote. So there is no risk that one person owning multiple businesses will be able to vote multiple times. And then we also, and I believe I have the Vice Mayor to thank for this, we saw some language in the annexation portion of the existing charter where businesses are actually permitted to vote in special elections for annexations. And in that provision, the businesses vote not only by power of attorney, which is the method we had in our provision, but they had two additional methods: power of attorney, a corporate resolution, and an affidavit. So we added some language to to this portion of the charter, which allowed those two additional methods for the businesses to vote. So now, It's vote by power of attorney, corporate resolution, and affidavit. So with those changes, I believe we addressed the questions and the comments that arose on March 14th. Again, this provision is going to go, if it's approved by council, these changes are going to go before the General Assembly. And if the General Assembly has questions, we can work those out. But if the state of Delaware allows businesses to vote in municipal elections, we anticipate that the General Assembly would approve this.
All right, City Council, do you have questions for our city solicitor?
Yeah.
Councilman King?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Griffin, just for clarity purposes, for my sake, so the language in here says that it would permit artificial domestic entities, including but not limited to. So can you expand on what that means?
Sure. So the corporate entities can, the bodies that they take can be almost limitless. So you can have an LLC, an LLP, a sole proprietorship. We could list ad nauseum every single type of business entity that there is, a charitable organization. But the manner in which most statutes, most code provisions read when they refer to artificial entities is to give a few examples, but to really just say artificial entities. So it's really without limitation. If it is an organization and it owns property in the city of Seaford, regardless of the structure of that organization, this provision would allow that organization to vote.
Okay. And just to follow up, so if I'm a business owner, right, and I have a business that's LLC'd, do I have the ability to allow someone, it's like, so if I give them authorization or approval, if I'm not going to be here, can I give them the authority to vote for that organization?
You can. So it'd be one of those three methods. So if you own the business, you can either have a corporate resolution and say, we resolve to appoint John Doe as our representative to vote. You can do an affidavit and say, I hereby authorize John Doe to vote. Or you could do a power of attorney and give John Doe a power of attorney to vote on behalf of the organization. So as the business owner, you control that vote, but you can authorize somebody to cast that vote for you.
Well, what if the business is in an LLC and there's multiple owners, or the business owns the property? Do they still have how is someone authorized or picked if there's multiple owners, or it's LLC and the property kind of owns itself? What does that look like?
Sure, it's a good question. The corporation or the artificial entity or the LLC would appoint that person to vote in the same way they would conduct any other normal business. So the example you gave was an LLC. Most LLCs have a managing member, and their operating agreement or the LLC agreement says the managing member is authorized to act in the best interest of the company. So however that LLC conducts its business, the city is not going to get involved in internal corporate discussions concerning who's going to cast that vote. That's entirely up to that entity.
Okay. And the last question, if I'm a business owner, right, let's say I have a business, and I'm just going to use some examples, like let's use Sal's, let's use Posey Palace, some businesses that own a business but they don't own the property, right? Let's say they rent the business but they pay for the city of Seaford electric, water, sewer, that they own the business but they don't own the property. Are they allowed to vote in this election?
If they don't own the property, they are not permitted to vote in the election. So these things, whenever any municipality decides who is going to have the authority to vote in an election, there's line drawing. You have to draw a line. Here, like in almost like in Fenwick Island and other municipalities, the decision has been made that if you live in the city, you get to vote. If you have invested in the city by owning property here, whether you're a private citizen or a company, if you've invested in the city by owning property here, you get to vote. If all you're doing is renting property here for profit or for other reasons, that's where the line is drawn. So, I think that's a fair, it's not up to me to decide whether it's good policy or not, but it's a common line to be drawn that you're invested in the city a little more if you're living here and you're owning property here than if you are simply renting property here and living somewhere else and having your company-owned property somewhere else.
All right, thank you. Okay. Appreciate it.
Other questions for Mr. Griffith?
Yeah.
Mr. Councilman Santos?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I still have concerns with this change to the charter. I think that you talked about how you have to draw the line to decide who gets to vote and who doesn't get to vote. And I think that the line's already been drawn at we the people. It's we the people for the people, not we the people and LLCs, corporations, and just, you know, you said that it can be any entity, and we're living in a very fast-paced world. What happens when an AI owns itself or owns a business? I think that this is an unequal representation. It can put outside influence in our democratic process, and it can marginalize voices and interests at the expense of the people. So if you go to USA.gov, you can find out who can vote, and there's a few criteria. You have to be registered to vote by the state's voter registration. You have to be 18 years old or on or before the election. In most cases, you have to be a United States citizen. I believe that California, Maryland, and Vermont allowed non-citizens to vote in local elections. And you have to be, there's these things. So if it says it should be a citizen, are we almost granting citizenship status to corporations? Because that's a right that the people have. And it also states that you should be 18 years old on the date that that you can cast a vote. And a corporation, well, a person, it takes 9 months, or give or take a few months to become it takes 9 months to be born, and it takes 18 years for them to gain the right to vote, and then they have to be in good standing. If they committed a felony at 18 years old and they were tried as an adult, they might never get that right. Am I correct? So, but here we are going to let someone, an entity that it takes a couple weeks, maybe a couple months to gain, to get the power to vote, when it hasn't matured as a person has. It doesn't have to be in good standing for 18 years. I think so. I think there's some areas here that I'm not really too comfortable with. Just giving the rights to an entity that is not a living person. Any thoughts?
I know you didn't ask me a question, and nobody cares, but nobody elected me, so I'm not taking a position on this. I did just want to point out that there is a provision in the language that requires the person voting on behalf of the entity to be a citizen. That's all I had to.
So, yeah, keep going.
Councilman Henderson?
Are you finished?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple questions. Is it not true that, and this could be for city manager, is it not true that non-resident sole proprietors who own property in the city are already allowed to vote?
Non-resident property owners can vote.
Of sole proprietorship. So.
I believe you're correct.
Right. So, because they're sole proprietors.
They own it.
My feeling is that a person should not be penalized by structuring their business, whether it's through a sole proprietorship or an LLC or a C Corp or an S Corp, just because they own property in the city and they're investing. So regardless of how the corporation is set up, people own it, or a person owns it. So I really don't see the difference there. And the other thing which escapes my mind at the moment would be, well, that's the first thing. There is another lingering thing. Maybe it'll come to me if somebody else has Mr. King
I
had
did,
something.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead. Councilman King.
So just to kind of expand, and that's perfect timing for something I wanted to ask and forgot. So as Councilman Henderson alluded to, so if I have an LLC set up or whatever falls within this entity, and I allow someone to vote, right? We talked about that, right? So I can pick someone to represent this organization. If I'm a property owner that lives outside of the state of Delaware, do I have the ability to pick someone to vote in my absence?
Make sure I understand. So
So
you're the
current
managing member of
charter.
an LLC.
Yep, so, no, you're right. So current charter, so my question is, if I'm a property owner, and I live outside of city limits, do I have the same luxury as what this new charter is is written? Can I get somebody else to vote in my absence? Can I pick someone to vote for me as a property
Sure.
owner?
I think the answer is yes, if I understand. So what you're saying is you live in Massachusetts,
Right.
but you own.
A rental. I own a rental, own property, right? So I can do an absentee, I can vote because I'm a property owner of Seaford, right? So I own rentals, so I have the
When you say
right,
you own rentals, you mean you own property that you rent to third parties?
yes,
Okay.
yep. So am I allowed to have somebody vote in my absence? Can I allow someone to vote for me?
I'm with the city solicitor. I want to make sure I understand it. So under current regulations, which is
Yes.
what you talked about,
Yep.
okay? If they're registered as a non-resident property owner.
Right, so they live in Pennsylvania and they have a rental
Yeah, if
on
they're,
Willie Street.
if they're properly registered as, in the book of registered voters,
Yep.
as a non-resident property owners, then they would be required to vote absentee.
Okay.
Okay?
Can they have somebody
They would
vote
be
in their
required to vote absentee. So I can't assign my absentee vote to someone else.
But this new charter is allowing entities and organizations to have somebody else, if they pick someone else, that can vote in their absence.
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
And
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, so if you live in Massachusetts or Pennsylvania, but your company owns property, I mean, the key here is, if your entity owns property in Seaford,
Mhm.
you can vote.
But if I'm a property owner and I have my rental LLC, if I don't do an absentee ballot, then I don't vote, right?
Right, you can't assign that absentee.
But we can under this new charter only for these entities, not residential property owners.
It is a nuance.
Okay.
Yeah, this would
But I
allow
think
you
you're
to
right.
give a power of attorney, corporate resolution, affidavit to somebody to
Right.
vote on your behalf.
But as long as it's not residential.
I don't understand that.
So as a landlord, right, so if I live outside of the city of Seaford, right, I live outside the city, I have rentals in the city that fall within the city parameter,
We probably
right?
do, or different. corp-
It's LLC'd, right? I don't have the ability to give that voting power to someone else as a property owner for residential under the current charter. I have to vote absentee ballot or not vote at all. This is allowing, so my question is this changing? Is this allowing residential property owners that have an LLC, can they pick someone else to represent that LLC and vote in this election?
Regardless of the type of business, whether it's a rental or anything else, if you own property, and if your company owns property in Seaford, you can designate somebody to vote through one of those three methods. So I think the answer is yes from what you're saying.
Okay, is that right? I didn't read that.
I'm sorry, I'm lost in the sauce on exactly. Just say it for me one more time.
Okay.
I apologize.
We're not talking about commercial, right? We're not talking, well, I'm talking about as a landlord, right? So like our current voting guidelines and structure is if I live in Pennsylvania, as an example, and I have rental properties on Willie Street.
Yep.
I have to register absentee in order to vote.
You have to register in the book of registered
Right.
voters, and you can vote absentee.
Right.
Right.
But I cannot delegate, I can't assign
Not
someone
currently.
to cast that vote.
Correct, not current.
So my question is, under this change of charter, is that going to change for all types of properties? If it's residential, if it's commercial, if it's,
So my understanding of this is, and I'm gonna get Dan Griffith to help me a little bit here. Even if it's residential, if it's held in an LLC or an artificial entity, you would fall underneath this and you'd be able to vote in accordance with it, right? Does
Yeah,
not
yeah,
matter.
There's no
The
distinction.
zoning.
There's no distinction on residential versus commercial on this.
Yeah, the zoning
Because
doesn't matter.
Currently, we don't do that. So not only are we changing this, I mean, there's a lot that's more than typically a handful of businesses. I mean, there's a lot of people that own real estate. I mean, I'm talking more of a residential than I am commercial. Now, this would give them the ability to assign someone on their behalf to cast a vote.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and let's define a lot. Let's define a lot. The city clerk went through, as council asked at, I believe it was 2 meetings ago on the 14th, went through our database of information that we have, and she identified 236 entities that would potentially be able to vote. Some of them have several. The most property owner, and he predominantly owns residential, owns 7 different entities. But, you know, we're talking about 236 entities here, not 1,000, 3,000, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, can he assign someone to vote for one of his businesses, and then as a property owner, he votes too?
One person, one vote.
All right.
So
Perfect.
he would get one.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Henderson.
it came to me. How do we go about treating nonprofits and churches?
They would be treated the same way as for-profits. They are artificial entities. They would have the right to vote in the same way as an LLC or an LLP. So they would designate one person. So long as they own property, they can designate somebody to vote for them.
Well, say it's a large denomination, United Methodist Church, the Catholic Church, Baptist Church, they have conferences, right? So they own the property, but a conference owns it. I would suppose that it would be owned in a corporate manner somehow. I'm not sure.
And that organization would designate somebody to vote for that organization in the election.
And a 501c3,
Same.
same thing.
So that person then would have to come in with some legal document that says, I'm the designated voter, and sign the book and show that to the clerk that I am this person.
Right. And again, I think the Vice Mayor would be entitled to credit for this, but businesses vote already in Seaford in special elections for annexations. So there is already a process in place for businesses to vote in Seaford.
Councilman Santos.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, but in the example that you provide, they vote for annexing a property, but not for people. It's, there's a difference. Now, if churches are going to be able to vote, are they also going to be taxed now? Or no? No?
My understanding is the taxation issues are federal. I think they have a federal exemption. There's nothing Seaford can do about that.
You are correct.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that the businesses, they can vote. They can have someone go out there and vote. A citizen go out there and vote, and that they're going to be voting for the interests of the company. And I think that they're holdable to their shareholders, and we as elected people over here, we are accountable to the shareholders of our citizens or our residents. And I don't want us to be put in a position where we have to make a decision that will benefit businesses at the expense of society. Now, right now there are entities that are buying properties all over the nation, and they have a lot of cash and they're buying properties. And so let's say this gets passed here and it gets passed in other cities around the country. Now, let's use as an example a popular company such as BlackRock. So if BlackRock owns properties all across the nation and municipalities start allowing people or entities to vote, would BlackRock have an influence on Seaford, Bridgeville, Fenwick, all these different places just by giving power of attorney and casting that vote?
They would have one vote.
They get one vote.
One vote in Seaford, one vote in Bridgeville, one vote in Fenwick Island.
just like any business would now. If there's a business that owns property right now in Seaford and also in Fenwick, they have one vote in each election.
Okay.
I have one question. Promise the last one.
Councilman King.
So, Mr. Griffin, we talked about rentals, right? So as a landlord, right, I have houses that I rent. The people have the ability to rent their boat, right, the renters. But I know you had alluded to when we talked about that same scenario as business owners, right? Saying that really got to kind of draw the line in the sand and talked about investment in our community, right? So as a landlord, right, I have the right to vote. The people that live in that house have the right to vote if they
live
fall, right? But then we talk about if I'm a business owner renting a building, and a lot of people don't own businesses, right? A lot of people rent because of all the depreciation and amortization, all the tax benefits of renting versus owning. But we're talking about the investments and the importance of having them participate. I mean, to me, a business owner, regardless if you own the brick and mortar, they have an invested stake in our community. And I think going in this direction and saying, hey, well, we're going to let this handful of people like vote, right, because they have a vested interest. But every small business owner that I've ever met in this community or outside of this community, regardless if they own the building or not, they have a huge investment in our community. And I think it's wrong not to give them an option to participate in our election. I mean, they're paying water, they're paying sewer, they're paying property taxes, they're paying everything, right? Just like this, the only difference is they're renting a building instead of owning it. There's no different than somebody rents a house from me. It's the same scenario.
So I understand that, that there's a line drawing involved. I just wanted to point out also, and I think we discussed this at the prior meeting, the practical difficulties associated with allowing lessees to vote will be difficult, because I know from just my litigation practice, the disputes between whether or not a lease is valid, whether or not a lease has been terminated, who really is whether or not this lease is still in effect or not. To put the city in the position of having to determine whether or not this person is a valid lessee of that property or not would make things very difficult for the staff. So it's not just a policy thing, and I really don't want to get involved in where the line should be drawn, because
Right.
I don't have a position in that. I know that other municipalities say when you own or live here, when you own property or live here, that gets you to vote. If you don't own property or live here, you don't get to vote. Doesn't matter to me where you draw the line.
Right.
But I can foresee if you allow lessees the opportunity to vote municipal elections.
Well, how do we check and measure the same process for renters? So when somebody comes in and says, hey, the last time I registered, I was renting a house from James King on Oak Street. So they come in, they vote again. How do we verify that they still are renting a house on Oak Street?
I don't know how it's done right now, how addresses are verified.
Well, what I'm saying is that would fall under the same scenario as trying to validate a small business, right? But how do we validate a renter that comes in and votes? How do we validate they're still renting and they're still within the city of Seaford?
I think there are methods whereby individual voters have to identify their
Yeah.
residents.
So it's handled through the state database now, okay? And right before the election, when they have the deadline for voter registration at the state level,
Right.
our city clerk reaches out to them and gets the database, which she's submitted to all the candidates who run. And so you have to be on that, and that's done annually with the election. So that's the check and balance. If you are registered and you have that driver's license and that property is within the corporate limits on that database, then you're able to vote.
Yeah, but I've also ran into elections and used that information as a tool, and I've gone to a lot of houses that the information is inadequate. It's wrong.
And we understand that.
Right.
No system is perfect.
Right.
But the third thing there, we can do all the checking and balancing that we want. There is an element of personal responsibility and the honor of the voter to maintain the integrity of our election system.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilman Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We received a list of all the artificial entities within the city of Seaford limits. Now, with this list, all of these entities would get, that are on my list, they would get the opportunity to vote at an upcoming municipal election if this was to go forward, right?
If they choose to come in and sign the book and have a designated person and have the documentation, just like we do with non-resident property owners now.
Yeah, you're generally correct. What, the list that you were given, also at the bottom of it, it was footed with how many have 7 votes, how many have 4 votes. So those would only get 1 vote if this were passed. And then they would have to come in and register in the book of registered voters, and then that would be updated annually by the city clerk and staff. So that list is our kind of first run at it right now. That list will look differently, as you know, going forward, but you're generally correct in your statement.
All right, so there's 208 entities that are listed here, and some of them say that they have 1 vote, some of them say that they have 4 votes. Can you explain that section a little bit again?
Yeah, so the city clerk put it together, but it doesn't say it has 4 votes. It says there are 4 artificial entities associated with that name. Am I correct, Ms. Heineke? Yeah, so she's just pointing out to you, there's a couple property owners that own several properties in different LLCs. We are familiar enough with our customers to where we know that, the owner of this LLC and this LLC and this LLC is the same person. Ms. Heineke's done her best to identify that for you in that list.
Okay, and I know that during mayoral elections, more people turn up to vote traditionally, and for whenever there's not a mayoral election, when it's for a councilman position, how many votes on average do you think we receive?
It varies pretty wildly. You can have anywhere from a couple hundred to quite a few hundred. If you have 5, 6 people running for, a couple seats, you can have a big turnout.
Okay. I just see a lot of LLCs here, and I don't want this to lead to decision that causes decisions to be made that prioritize business interests above, the community and the environment. So.
Okay, other questions for Mr. Griffith? Yes, sir.
Mr. Griffith, so last time you said that you couldn't protect the voter integrity, but now you said that you can, or that with the changes that are made, that everybody gets 1 vote. But during the last meeting, it didn't seem to be so clear.
My recollection of the question last meeting was, can I guarantee that there won't be voter fraud because of these provisions? And I think my answer was, and I would stand by it, I can't guarantee that there won't be any voter fraud with respect to this any more than I can individual voter fraud.
Yeah, last time it was because I asked who was the person that was going to be vetting whether the power of attorney that was received came from the right individual, and that they weren't getting multiple power of attorneys, and I didn't want there to be ways that people go around the rules that we currently have.
Yeah, as the city manager mentioned, if people want to try to skirt the law, individuals can try to skirt it, and businesses can try to skirt it, but this provision doesn't provide any less protection than we have with respect to individuals voting. It's the same level of protection as individuals.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions in regards to this?
Mr. Mayor, might I ask your indulgence for
No, sir.
a single question?
No, sir. If there are no further questions, I will accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the draft changes to Section 7 of the City of Seaford Charter that would permit artificial domestic entities, including but not limited to corporations, partnerships, trusts, and limited liability companies in the state of Delaware the ability to vote in municipal elections as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Henderson. Is there a second?
Councilman Holland, Mr. Mayor, I second that motion.
Okay, are there any questions on the motion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Henderson?
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman King.
All right, I'm going to explain why I'm voting the way I am before I vote.
I'd appreciate it.
No problem. So I am not in favor of this proposed charter change. I'm very concerned with the language used, and I have major concerns with how it is written. I feel that this new process would be hard to manage. This charter would allow and empower partnerships, trust, and companies the power and ability to appoint someone to represent them. But unfortunately, small business owners who do not own their property cannot participate in any election. Once again, I feel that this process is extremely hard to manage and could open the doors to voter fraud. With all the problems the city had with the last election, I don't like adding additional confusion, potential voter fraud, and definitely don't believe in giving the Book of Registries more power. So with that, my answer is I'm against it, no.
And Councilman Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to vote no because this is we, the people, for the people.
Okay. So we have a tie vote. So in the case of a tie, that vote then comes to the mayor, and I will vote aye in favor of it. So with that, we will draft this up, and we will send this to our representatives to the General Assembly to get passed.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, I'd like to go on record too and just make the comment that you're the one that actually brought this motion to begin with. So having the tiebreaker vote for a motion or for something you brought up, I just want to just put that out there. Okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right. Reminder of meetings.
We have no meetings. The only item we have on the agenda is the municipal election this Saturday, April 15th, from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., and there are 3 people running for 2 seats. Councilman Jose Santos has filed for re-election, Mike Bradley has filed for councilman, and Councilman Dan Henderson has filed for re-election. That is all I have, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll go to committee reports. We'll start with Administration IT. Councilman Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My report has been submitted in its entirety. The following meetings were attended by city staff. They met with the city engineer and the KRM's consultant regarding stormwater accommodations at the Western Sussex Business Campus development. They attended a drinking water subcommittee meeting, a staff meeting, and station meeting at the Seaford Police Department. They attended a mower bid opening. They walked through the Seaford community pool to look at proposed improvements. They met with a developer proposing to develop R3 property into subsidized housing. Purchase new license and upgrades for I'm sorry, Mayor. I believe that the report that's been uploaded to my give me 1 second. For the IT report, they purchased new licenses and upgrades for camera software. They purchased additional SSDs for storage server space. And for the administration report, they attended contract negotiation meetings for IBW Local 126 and review contract documents. All other service is routine.
Okay, next go Police and Fire. Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Both reports are complete by Chief Wilson and Chief Kraft. I'll go over some highlights. For April, the fire department has responded to 22 calls so far this month for an average call per day of 2.2. EMS, there have been 95 calls in April for an average call per day of 9.5. There's, for the year, total calls for both sections of the department are 1,352 calls for an average of 13.5 calls year to date. In other statistics, you'll see the total number of calls in city and out of city for both fire and EMS. Fire for the total for fire, pardon me. Total for fire with out of city, in city, and assist is 243. EMS for the year is 991. spread out from in-city, out-of-city, and assists. There's another chart here showing hours in service, personnel in service, total personnel hours, and miles traveled. Last month, there's information for last month, the month of March, and totals for the year. Significant incidents: there was motor vehicle crash with entrapment on Middle Ford Road on 27th of March. April 1st, there was the severe storm response for the tornado that went through Bridgeville and Greenwood. April 2nd, there was a motor vehicle crash involving a motorcycle on Baker Road. And on April 7th, there was a vehicle crash with entrapment on Atlanta Road and Federalsburg Road. Under apparatus status, Rescue 87 is out of service for a DOT inspection. The next item here is under fuel usage, and the last period we shared the amount of fuel. So they went to the pump 63 times for a total of 1,040 gallons, 1,040.65 gallons, for a total cost of $3,706.04. The last training was held on April 5th at Station 87. Block 1 of the Delaware State Fire School's Rope Rescue 1. And they still have the Delaware State Fire School training trailer out at the station, so there will be future training on April 19th and May 13th for more rope rescue classes. And there's, on April 22nd, there's a live fire burn on Neal School Road for a property that was acquired, or a building that was acquired, not the property. Chief Wilson has included a training chart to show you total man hours in training. This is year to date. I think there's 788 hours and 50 minutes of total training that's occurred this year so far. Under EMS, ambulance B87's back from repairs from the collision at Tidal Health in Anticoke. Ambulance A87 repairs were completed on the rear suspension. So all 3 ambulances are currently in service. EMS is still hiring full and part-time positions. On April 21st, the Phoenix Awards will be presented at Deltec in Georgetown. And Phoenix Awards are presented by county EMS to crews who have successfully saved a person's life through the use of CPR. The person who was saved by EMS usually is in attendance to help present the award. There was a couple past employees and current part and full-time employees that will be awarded for their efforts, and they are as follows. We have Thomas Jefferson III, Elmo Peak, Ashley Taylor, Samantha Lewis, and Logan Cleversey and Hunter Blake. Now, if you encounter these people in your daily walk, please give them their congratulations for their heroism in saving a life. Under news and events, they've started the new ladder truck specification process. They're hiring a consultant to assist with the specifications, and they're hoping for a June or July bid proposal. And when they'll get their bid packages back, and then they'll go through a review process, go through a voting process, select that, and then it's 1.5 to 2 years delivery for the piece of equipment. So you're looking 2025, 2026 to get a new piece of equipment. Seaford Police Department, Chief Kraft has his report here. The 5-year period with 2023 year-to-date, 2,938 total complaints with a distribution of all the complaints. False alarms seem to be below average, but the year is young. We'll see what happens. On an annual rate, it does look like it's going to come in under. And that's positive because it keeps resources on the street rather than having to deal with false alarms. So that's good. The lower that number is, the better. Under all crimes, 172 contacts with 9 felonies, 51 misdemeanors, 9 violations, 1 civil, and 102 other. You can see the distribution rate over the days. Seems like traditionally Fridays and Saturdays are big. Thursday nights are usually big nights for activity, but that's down this period. And on the chart to the right, you can see the time of day that's most active. Under drug complaints, there were a total of 16 drug complaints. And you'll see the distribution there. Traffic complaints, there were 233 traffic contacts, resulting in 52 citations and 8 warnings. 3 DUIs, 2 alcohol, 1 drug, with 0 crash-related DUIs. 16 total crashes, 2 injury accidents, 10 reportable and 10 non-reportable and 4 reportable. 6 hit and runs, 3 of them were on private property, and 3 of them, two were on Sussex Highway, and 1 was on Norman Eskridge. There are a number of significant events listed here that I'll let you go through. Under admin, they were busy doing community meetings and administration meetings. Under events, they were present for a talent show at Fred Douglass after hours. SRO Detective Wingate was present for that. And there were several cars out and about providing traffic control for the Good Friday Prayer March that was held on the east side of town. And I really want to thank them for being present for that and helping with that. March 28th, there was an active assailant symposium that the chief and deputy chief attended. And there was some other training there for collecting DNA from firearms, and that was Detective James and Detective Nanola. There's another chart there with total criminal arrests, which is broken down into adult and juvenile through the last several years that you might find useful. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, sir.
The report that I read was the one for the last week. I realized halfway through, but there was the one that I'm about to read is the one for the current.
You want to do yours again?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
go ahead.
All right. The meetings that were attended were Denny Short's coffee meeting, the Citizens Police Academy graduation station meeting with the Seaford Police Department, the Riverfest meeting, and the monthly code department meeting. They attended, well, some of you guys attended the Scat Breakfast meeting, and for the IT report, they did firework with assurance. They worked with security camera installations and configurations. And they attended contract negotiation meetings with the IBW Local 126 and reviewed contract documents. They've been working on the fiscal year 2024 budget. They attended the health insurance renewal meeting with Integra, and they are preparing contract negotiations with the Teamsters Local 326 and the police department. And all other business is routine. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we have Code, Parks and Rec. Councilman Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll start off with Parks and Recs. Repairs were made to the J-Nest for the spring/summer season. And Gateway Park has been decorated with a banner and blue ribbons for Autism Awareness Month. And we'd like to thank everyone that showed up and participated. Greatly appreciate it. And youth soccer schedules were completed and distributed to coaches. The league is to begin on Wednesday, April 12th, with a total of 26 teams. And men's slow pitch is to begin on Monday, April 17th, with a total of 5 teams in the league. And they hosted the Lighted Up Blue event, 4-3 in Gateway Park, and all the work is routine. That concludes my report, and at this time, my apologies, I have not received a report for Code.
Okay.
He's off this week.
Yeah.
All right. Finally, we have Public Works Wastewater Treatment. Councilman King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start with the Public Works Department. Fire hydrant replacement continues throughout our city. Hydrants on Shipley and Harrington Street were pulled and capped off. Hydrants replaced on Cedar and Popular. Several new signs were installed. The thermal yield sign placed on the road on South Market, which is very interesting when you get a chance to talk to a lot of people in the community. They actually thought it was a real sign that actually blew down or was laying on the road, but it's actually in the road. So that's getting a lot of attention and awareness, which is good. That's the whole purpose of it being there. And then, of course, a no truck sign placed on Oak Road, which is really, really good with all the Amazon traffic going in and out of the community. We'll sign up and actually law enforcing that. I think the neighbors are really excited about that. Director's working with contractor to base coat pave Muirfield Phase 3. The director is also currently having conversations around several more paving projects in the future. I'll jump over to the wastewater treatment facility. The plant is looking good. Blend tank was cleaned on 3/21. Annual inspections were done, no major concerns, which is a good thing. The RAS pump number 3 was installed. Mounting and piping is completed. Some of the electrical and VFD programming is needed to be done, and then once that is complete, it'll be ready for testing. The March DMR and septic report is complete, and some of the projects that are coming up over the next couple of weeks, it's that time of the year again, so they're starting to spray weeds, work on property cleanups, work continues on the water meter issues, repair cleanouts on the smoke testing list, and of course keep the plant up and running with 0 violations. And with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report.
All right, thank you very much. I do want to say thank you to the city, Katie, and Parks Department, along with our IT department, getting the Autism Lighted Up Blue event set up. It was a great event, great turnout. Thank you for the council members that came. Also want to thank Unified Seaford for leading our Easter services too throughout our town. They do a fabulous job. So with that, I'll accept a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make that motion.
I have a motion from Councilman Holland. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilman Santos seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?